Hello, everybody. Once again, I am Lehman Crafton Jr., aka Zorvalachan Less Than Guru. And today I wanted to do kind of a mini review, mini, both kind of, and many, as in many things and as tiny things. So lots of things and tiny things, maybe. I want to talk about Earthdawn. And normally I would review different editions separately, like I did with Original Torg and like I did with Torg Eternity. I separated those into two long series. And I believe I did Beckme as the rules cyclopedia, as well as the previous box sets, Mars Video Cat decided to come. Um, so basically, I normally would do that, but with Earthdawn, I kind of wanted to more give my opinions, and that everything in these discussions and videos are my opinions, and I understand other people have various opinions, especially those who are extremely invested in a game or a game setting, game rules, mechanics, and things like that. But basically, I just want to say my own. Everybody can get a platform on YouTube, so why not? So I decided to do the different Earthdawn games or editions that I'm familiar with. And I don't want to do any type of edition war, but I do want to maybe have a tiny like reverse rant, I guess. Um, because sometimes I think certain systems or editions of systems might get a bad rep that might necessarily not have it. Um, Again, this is from somebody who is not very extremely invested. It's not like I spent the last 30 years playing Earthdawn um, continuously, but I have played it enough to understand the world and understand the mechanics and things like that. So, having said that, I do want to, as I've stated many times, I do want to put my personal uh, spin on things because sometimes I think what's happened to a person personally affects how they perceive games and why somebody might have one extreme view over here and somebody else might have an extreme view over here and they can't communicate because they don't see how their personal lives and moments and times that they've experienced that game might, uh, for lack of a better word, color their various perceptions of a game system. So basically, I do want to say that. So when I first found out about Earthdawn, it was very close to when it was originally published back in, I believe it was 1993. And one of my friends had got the first edition book, and he was showing it to me, and I looked through it casually, and I thought it seemed like a really cool system. And we went as far as making characters. And I do remember that I had made a windling Beastmaster. I thought that would be a cool concept of the windling not necessarily doing the damage and up there in battle, but having like a warhound or something. I do remember I looked in the equipment list. Certain things I remember really crystal clear, and other things I have no concept of what's happened in game. But I do remember that first um, character concept. Now, for whatever reason, we never did play, but I do remember making that character. And then, so that was say around 93. Now, almost 10 years passed before Earthdawn was brought up again. And there was a time when I was going to college, and at first I went to Purdue for 2 years, but then I went to University of Missouri at Mizzou in Columbia, Missouri. And I met a couple of people. We gamed there together. And then over a couple of years, it was a weird shift of dynamics. Is I was born and raised in the St. Louis region. That's on the east side, middle east of Missouri, and I moved to the central Missouri, Columbia, Jeff City area. And in a span of like 5 years, friends that I had met at the University of Missouri in central Missouri, they got jobs and moved to St. Louis, and I got jobs in Columbia. So they were from mid Missouri and stayed there, and we kind of switched areas. And depending on where you live, that mid to eastern Missouri can be say 90 minutes to 2 hours of a drive, depending on where you are. So it became a point where we were making weekly long trips and it was usually in St. Louis where we did things, which was funny. So the people in Columbia would drive to the St. Louis. Didn't matter who was in the St. Louis. That's where we drove. So there was a time around, I want to say around 2003 or so, that I got into another Earthdawn campaign with a few of the people from that original Earthdawn group, and we finally got together. And one of the players and game masters, he decided to game master. And again, I really like that windling concept, and I was going to go with a Beastmaster, but somebody else wanted to be a Beastmaster, so instead I went with the Cavalryman. And there's kind of like two different staples, I guess you could say, for the windling Cavalryman. And I didn't really want to go with either of those. I wanted to get a Jaguar. For whatever reason at that time, I was really like, I want a Jaguar. I think I just wanted to say, no, I have a Jaguar. Or something crazy stupid like that. So made the character, played the game, and I'll admit at that point in time of gaming, which I was probably in my late 20s at the time, while I never considered myself a min-maxer, I didn't like if I was a fighter type character, if my damage or my skill, my ability to do things in combat were very far away from other people. And we also had a windling warrior. That group, we had three windlings. We had a windling warrior, a windling wizard, and I was the windling cavalryman. And we had a bunch of trolls also, who we made our carry trolls, and it was a lot due to me, but windlings got banned for like 2 decades, or decade and a half after that, because of crazy stuff that I did as a windling and got my other windlings to do. And we had friends that came and played a few times, and one of them was a windling, so there was 4 windlings. Anybody who knows Earthdawn can understand how that could end up as a problem. But I was seeing as a cavalryman that me with my weapon on my mount, charging all of these things together, they would all add up and they would equal, say, what the Troll Sky Raider could do. And this Troll Sky Raider could do that any time at all. And my windling can only do that if there were very specific things that I did, if I set up a thing and went on. So I kind of got discouraged a little bit. And and this is one of those things, I can remember that specific thing of wanting a warhound with a windling familiar, but I can't remember if I talked to the game master or if he just understood that I was kind of getting a little, I don't want to say disgruntled. That's a very, very powerful word, much more powerful. But I was getting a little blah about my character. And at the beginning, I was really, really into the character. And so there was a point where we were in Parlainth, which is a dead, horror-filled city, and I touched something on a wall. I was curious, and windlings are curious, and it killed me or took my mind away or something like that. And I brought in a troll cavalry. And I brought in the troll because as a troll, I was strong, and I could do that damage. Not quite as good as the warrior or the Sky Raider, but I could still hold my own by myself and not necessarily with my Grandland mount. Now, if I could get on my mount and we were in an open area and I could do these things, then I could do much. But just by myself, I could do enough. So we did that. And I want to say, but I'm not sure, I want to say that there was life experiences where I went from being a normal employee in a company to a supervisor in a company, and that kind of shifted priorities. And I ended up doing that hour and a half to 2 hour drive. I can't remember exactly what the exact time was, but I couldn't do that long drive every Friday to do the Earthdawn game, so I kind of fell out of it. And there were other things that happened with that job that caused me to roleplay less and less. But there was a time around 2014, 2015, where one of my other old players that was in Columbia and I'm living in Jeff City, and that's only 30 minutes away. We met at a big group gathering, and he's like, "Hey, I have this Sunday game, and we're playing Earthdawn, and I'd like to invite you to do it. And we just hit Circle 2, so you can bring in a character and you can make them Circle 2." And I thought I'll at least try this. And it was with people that besides the game master who I knew and his wife who had gamed with us a lot, and then one no, sorry. I knew that those two people were there. So I went and showed up, and lo and behold, one of the players there was an old professor of mine, which is funny, and he's now one of my regular players. But it's funny how that happens, where people that you know each other, but they didn't meet through you, or you didn't meet through them. It's just the way things happen. And then a few other people who I had never met before, and at that time, he said, "We're playing second edition." And this is where I want to go off on my little rant, because I know a lot of people hate and have really bad negative things to say about second edition. And even at that time, when he's like, "We're doing in second edition," and I looked up on the internet, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, second edition, do first, never do second, never do second." Or do classic, I think was out at the time as well. But the game master was doing second edition, so I went there, and again, I didn't want to do the troll or the windling cavalrymen, and I was just testing it because I was still in is driving 30 minutes going to be something that I can do on a weekly basis. Um, or maybe it was even every other week. I can't remember if we were doing weekly or every other week at that time. But it was let me try this. So I made up kind of I hate to say it, but I made a throwaway character. Plus, it had been almost 10 years since I had played any type of Earthdawn again, and I made a windling scout. I thought the concept of a scout being a part warrior, part thief would be good, but in my opinion, the scout says it's that, and it doesn't do either job halfway decent. My opinion. Again, if you're a person who loves scouts, great. But in my experience, I did not like that character. After the first game, I'm like, yes, I like this group. I would like to play Earthdawn. I kind of started remembering things. Yes, I want to invest in this game master. Can I please make another character? Because that was a completely wrong character concept for me. And he said yes. So the first thing I wanted to do is again windlings, because I don't know. I don't play fairies in any other games, but in Earthdawn, I'm a windling fanatic, I guess. So I'll just say that I love the concept of windlings in Earthdawn. I guess because they're like a foot and a half instead of tiny. They're a little bit bigger. I don't know. I just windlings with dragonfly wings get me much more than fairies with butterfly wings, or something. Whatever it is, I I'm a windling fan. Okay, so I've said that. So what happens is I decide that I wanted to be a Sky Raider, but then I found out windlings can't be Sky Raiders in second edition. So then I wanted to be a Sword Master, but then I found out that another character was a Sword Master. So I didn't want to, or I want to be, sorry. Then I was going to be Air Sailor. Sorry, couldn't be a Sky Raider. Decided to be Air Sailor. Somebody else was an Air Sailor, and I didn't want to be the same thing. So I decided instead to be something completely strange for a windling that they could be, but that would help the party. And I've never played a mage. I do play mages in some games. It's just I didn't want to at this time invest so much into learning the spell system. So I decided to be a windling weaponsmith, and I thought the concept would be cool. You have this full size anvil, and to get my strength as high as I could as a windling, or pretty close to high as I could, and have like a normal, forge hammer, but have it be like this big thing that I'm basically standing on the armor and hitting it, or things like that, or have a helper hold it, and I tell them, and then I smack it at the right point at the right time. But just that thought of being a windling weaponsmith really, really intrigued me. It made me get to be my windling, and it gave a group purpose with forge weapon. I was able, or forge blade, I think it was called at that time. I could benefit the group as the party. And then I figured once I got to forge armor, that I could then maybe switch to be a swordsman or something like that. But I wanted at the beginning to kind of focus. And as time went on, that windling actually became quite a decent fighter type thing. Even with forging weapons, for we had a dwarf, I believe it was dwarf warrior, a human beastmaster, a elf air sailor, um, and then some other specialty and mage classes. But I was actually a pretty decent warrior, and that really helped me. I wasn't the best, and I don't want to be a best. But if I'm going to be a warrior type, I want to be in a certain range, and I think that's what the Windling Cavalryman in that first edition that I didn't quite get me to what I consider that viable range, and that could be just because I didn't make the character correctly. But really enjoyed that, and we played that maybe like 3 to 4 years, I want to say, and then again life happens. And a couple of the players, or at least one of the players, just completely dropped off the face of the earth. I still have no idea what happened to the player. And then the game master had to set aside the game. We went to another game, and we never came back. But I in that second edition was very invested in my character as a weaponsmith. I was coming up with ways that I was talking with the game master to kind of maybe make a thread item or a heart blade or something like that. I actually want to talk about it. Do I? Oh, I have it here. Maybe. Yes. So I even here. See, I have this whole plan of all skills, materials that I need, why I needed them, all, and then I even like wrote up a treatise to give to the game master of the reason that I just my character in character did it. But I was really in character, and even in first edition, I'll show you. I didn't have the first edition book. They had a CD that came out that was like a HTML web page CD that had everything. So I actually printed off my cavalryman stuff, and I printed off all the talents and combat stuff and experience. Basically, all I needed for that character, I printed off, and then um, I made kind of these journal things. If you'll see, I made these monthly. The months, there's 10 months. There are 5 days per week, 5 weeks per month, and kind of like what anybody did, would do that. And I had it. You can see I filled them out, and I kept a track of experience or legend points in this game, as they're known. But I kept track of all that for the entire group to help the game master out and relieve some pressure from him. But like I said, I wasn't number crunching in my head and daydreaming about it 24 hours a day like some people do in role playing games, and I have done in different systems. But I was really interested in the game. And if you've seen my journals, which is probably back there, but I keep journals. So in second edition, I had a journal, and I was, as I just showed you, second edition, I went ahead and I did buy the books off of Amazon. They were second edition might have even been over by that time, but I got the main book and then the companion book, and I got those. And then at the time we were playing, fourth edition came out. I missed the Kickstarter, but I did actually buy the PDF. Um, so I actually have that here, the PDF I put on my little tablet. So it is there that I bought at the time to kind of compare it. And when I did read the rules for that fourth edition, I did like it a lot. But I think we were already like third or fourth circle, and we and the game master and other players didn't feel like converting characters over. But I do remember that I really liked the idea of the optional talents instead of every talent you have to get, because as I was working my way through the weaponsmith, there were certain things that I was like, I don't really want any of this. I don't really want this, but I have to get it to be able to raise my circle, and that's why they did a lot of the changes for fourth edition, which I really like. But then, like I said, that game stopped. That group stayed together, but then the original group when I had my like the one group kind of spun off, people moved, we started doing different games, and then once they moved, we started doing Toward Eternity online, as I talked about, and then that first Earth Dawn group game um, later, then they started doing Toward Eternity. But like I said, I'm having to give myself a rest from game mastering Toward Eternity. So the original Earth Dawn, the Earth Dawn First Edition group, uh, we were talking about what games to play, and we some of us were ready to play a certain game, but it seemed like about half the people weren't really interested in that game. And we were like, well, what games would you be interested in? And Earthdawn kind of got brought up, and then people started talking about it as if that's what the game were going to be. And then it's kind of like, it seems like we forced one of the players to be the game master, which sorry, sort of sorry, for them, but I didn't want a game master. I wanted to play with that group. So yay, we forced somebody to game master Earthdawn 4th edition. And we're getting into 4th edition. And again, I'm a windling guy, so I convinced the game master to let me play a windling, said I wasn't going to be this stupid little flighty windling. I would keep the curiosity aspect. But because I did that type of thing with, I never was able to complete. I think I got around a third of the materials and was getting things done, but I never was able to complete it. And it's one of those things where I've talked about in other games where you get to a point with a character where it's like the character concept is realized, and if the character dies, you're just like, he's lived the life I wanted him to live. I'm happy he lived that. But like with my old windling Weaponsmith, I wasn't quite there. I was like, it was like within reach. Like I'm reaching, I'm good. But I didn't get there. So I'm going to be a windling Weaponsmith again. We'll see how that goes. Now, if this character ends up dying before that, then I'm going to be something completely different. No, not a windling, not a Weaponsmith. Maybe we'll see. But I'll try to be something different. It's just I want to have another chance of realizing that thing that I was so close to getting. But tomorrow, why I'm doing this is tomorrow we're going to have our first session. I don't know if we'll actually get to play or if we're getting things, but I'm really excited for it. I'm the windling Weaponsmith. We actually have another windling who's going to try that cavalryman, so I hope he has much better success than I do. I wish him a good time. I think also being a jaguar, if I would have to do that again, I would be I think it was the Zoet, the flying mount, because when you're riding a cat, you don't get to use your windling wings. So again, I think I might have created that character incorrectly. And then we have an elf beastmaster, an elf archer, and an elf elementalist. We have a dwarf elementalist, a an orc swordsman, and then the last one's going to be a warrior, and the player before tomorrow will figure out if he is going to play a human or a troll. So that is our party. I'm really excited to do Earthdawn. I love the system. I love rolling all the different types of dice together. I love the step system. It was really cool. So it's a system very close, not mechanically, but in my mind. It's not quite Torg, but it is that game of if somebody says, hey, you want to play Earthdawn? I'm going to say yes, and I'm not even going to ask what edition it's. So I kind of delayed my tiny little rant. So my tiny little rant is 2nd edition gets a lot of hate. And maybe when you like crunch numbers, or you were so invested maybe in the 1st edition that makes sense you didn't like it. But I'm one that if you watch any of my videos, you know that I actually enjoyed 4th edition D&D. I'm one of those. So hate me all you want. I think it was a good combat system that allowed the freedom of role play that I, as a game master, wanted. And people said, "Oh, you couldn't role play." No, it wasn't structured like 3.5. It was more like role playing in 1st edition or 2nd edition, which didn't really have role playing rules because they felt you don't need role playing rules. It was a lot more fluid. You could use many different skills to do the same thing. Um, depending on how logical you could do it. And they had the base rule was if there's not a rule for it, figure out a difficulty number, figure out the skill that makes sense, and roll. And that could determine whether or not you succeed. That, to me, that framework, it gave you a nice framework for social things, and that's good. And I don't think that you need a skill for every freaking little thing to be able to do that. But that's fourth edition D&D. I kind of see similar things with second edition, where when I hear people talk about fourth edition or third edition, and they're like, oh yeah, this was this way in first edition, and people realized that it was wrong, but we changed things, and it was probably third edition when we changed it, but we changed it this way. And then I look and I'm like, no, that's kind of what second edition had. And I'm not a second edition big fan of any means. I said I like fourth edition better. I love the idea of being able to have those optional things. Um, I do like having a physical book. I would get a physical book for fourth edition, but I've heard that they fall apart. I don't see that as bad for rules or anything. I just would like to have a nice hardback covered book, and if that was part of the Kickstarter that I missed, I'm very sad about that. But I do want to say things like first edition Forge armor was really, really high. I think I was listening to a podcast recently that they said that it was probably around like maybe circle 11 or something. And they're like, yeah, we brought it down. And I think it's circle 5 in fourth edition. And this is the Weaponsmith type thing because that's what I was playing in this edition and that's what I'm playing in fourth edition. And they're like, maybe that was brought down in third. No, in this edition, it was sixth circle. So one circle off. And I kind of see that as a D&D thing. There are a lot of things in 5th edition D&D that come from 4th edition, but they changed the name of it because they don't want to tell you that it's from 4th edition. Because if you know it's from 4th edition, then it's from 4th edition, we can't have it, we'll hate 5th edition. So 5th edition was like, oh, let's not call them healing surges, let's call them hit dice, because hit dice was an original term that was used in first, second such editions. So yeah, we'll call a healing little mechanic like that, where you use those up instead of calling them healing surges. So maybe I'm completely wrong, but I know when I hear people talk about fourth edition, they talk about first edition, they'll talk about classic, they'll talk about third edition, and then they just completely ignore that second edition was a thing. And yes, if I'm looking at from a player, if I'm looking at my cavalrymen, they had wheeling attack, I believe, at it was either third or fourth circle. Actually, I have it right here, so I could look it up. Wheeling attack, which is one of the staples of a cavalryman at third circle. So it's third circle. You could get that charge every round as you spun and did things. I believe that's what it was. And in second edition here, I want to say it was later. Wheeling attack, wheeling defense. Wheeling attack is 5th circle, and wheeling defense is 7th. That's when you can do the same thing to help defend against, and maybe that was a one that was also a little. Wheeling defense was 5th. So yeah, if you were a cavalryman, I could see how you hated second edition, because some of your staple, your main things that you felt you needed to be cool to be part of that class got kicked down a lot. I can see that. But it wasn't like that with everything. With the Weaponsmith, they made it a lot more like it is in 4th edition than what it was in 2nd. So I just want to say any edition of Earthdawn is fun. I will play any edition, but I wonder, in my opinion, I'm not, it is my opinion, it's not necessarily true, but that 2nd edition isn't a bad system. Some people might not like plot, but you can always change plot. I've talked about that. Make the game your own. You can change meta plots. I encourage people to play meta plots. I don't want a meta plot game as a player that if I've read a book, then I know everything that goes along with it. I was talking with a game master today. He was talking about threats. And I'm like, I have no idea of any type of threats, any creatures, any animals besides when I was a cavalryman looking for a mount, I have zero clue besides what I've experienced in game. Like cadavermen, I know that once you hit a certain, give them, maybe you give them a wound, so you wanted to give them enough damage but not let them take a wound. They go crazy and like get 4 attacks instead of 1 attacks. I know that from play, but through just me reading as a player in Earthdawn, I don't read that stuff because I want as a player to be excited and surprised by what is out there. And that's something that I, as a gamer, limit myself if I was ever game mastering it, which this is a game I'd much rather play. I couldn't see myself really game mastering it, not because it's a bad game, system to game master. It's just it's different than Torg. Torg is something that I've always game mastered. I enjoy playing now, especially recently. Um, but I've known it so long that I can just slip in it pretty much at any time. Earthdawn is not quite that. I would have to learn a lot more rules because I've intentionally not read things. I haven't read about spellcasting because I've never been a spellcaster, and that's something to be a little amazed about when the mages in the party do their threads and like I'm weaving a thread and I'm like, what's that mean? Oh, next round, boom, something goes off and something cool's happening where I'm weaving a thread to a magic item to or a group item, and basically when you get thread weaving, now you get it at first circle, but before you got it at fourth or fifth, I think fourth circle. Um, I didn't learn about that. And once I got it, I'm like, okay, this we have a group, we have a group name, we're doing this bond. Now I'll learn how this works. Or I got this item, now I'll see how this works. So that's how I kind of explore Earthdawn. So maybe what I've said is completely bad, and you can write in and say why I'm wrong and why this edition sucks more than every other edition and why people don't even really acknowledge that it exists. Um, but I had fun with it. The 3 years that I played my windling Weaponsmith, I had just as much fun as when I was playing my first edition, a Cavalryman. Now, hopefully, the fourth edition, which just by reading the rules that affect me as a weaponsmith, seem really cool. I do miss that a few of the things in the I won't be able to pick all those optionals or a couple of the optionals that I would like to. That's kind of I don't get all my choices, but I get choices. And I think that that's a good thing. So I'm around 32 minutes. By the time I wrap up, it'll be 35. So I'll go ahead and close. So that's kind of my Earthdawn crazy half review reminiscing about my life of role playing in Earthdawn. But again, when I do these reviews, I want to do them personalized to me so you can understand where I'm coming from. You can watch other videos, you can understand my concepts, you can hear me say I like fourth edition, and then you go, nope, not gonna like this Earthdawn thing because he likes fourth edition, so nope, not gonna go there. Which again, fourth edition had those healing surges are kind of like recovery tests in Earthdawn. So kind of an interesting thing where games, if they don't take from something else, I'm not going to say steal, but steal if you want to use that term. But if they inspired by something else, sometimes it can be independent things that two people independently have a good idea and they realize, hey, this was the same idea and stuff. So Earthdawn is a game that I really like playing a lot, and I'm very excited to be playing tomorrow. We're playing fourth edition, so I played first edition, I played second edition, I played fourth edition. I haven't played classic, I haven't played third, so maybe by not playing them, I don't understand how bad second edition was. But when I look at that compared to first edition, um, I understand the limits that they put on a forged weapon. It makes sense to me. I like the limitation year in a day. It makes more sense. I've listened to podcasts about the forge weapon for Earthdawn Survival Guide. I'll give a shout out to that. I just listened to that today, and I understand it, and I agree with that. But when I was playing second edition, I did understand that first edition was a little too open for the same reasons that the designer of fourth edition stated. Um, Cavalrymen, yes, they went from getting all their stuff at the beginning to having it spread out. And if you're a cavalryman, CAV, not CAL, a cavalryman, then you might have been very disappointed, and maybe some of the other disciplines were like that. But I had fun as a weaponsmith. I felt um, my character contributed to the party, and not just in combat, but out of combat doing stuff. And that's how I'm looking forward to tomorrow to playing. That we have 4 kind of frontline fighters, so I can even take a even more step back and do more support. I'll say that. So again, I am Lehman Crafton Jr., aka Zorvalachan Less Than Guru, and that is my Earthdawn all editions that I've played review with my personal all my personal opinion. So having said that, until next time, I will catch you later.